NATO leaders are meeting again today in Lithuania, with Ukraine President Volodymyr Zelensky saying he has three priority questions after NATO leaders failed to commit to a time frame for Ukraine joining NATO. So he's outlined his needs. First, new weapons packages. Second, an invitation for NATO membership. And the third, quote, security guarantees for Ukraine on the way to NATO. Joining us with a closer look from Kingston is retired Major General David Fraser. Good morning to you.
Lindsey.
So President Zelensky has those three asks I mentioned: the weapons, the invitation, and more security. In your opinion, do you think he'll get the answers he's looking for?
I think he's got most of the answers he's looking for, but not everything. I mean, he wanted an actual date when Ukraine was going to be invited into NATO. He got a one-step process. He got a commitment from NATO that they will be invited, but not during the war. And now the next thing is he absolutely needs ammunition right now to fight the Russians. That'll be the big discussion that's going to happen probably today.
NATO leaders issued a statement saying, quote, we fully support Ukraine's right to choose its own security arrangements. Ukraine's future is in NATO. We reaffirm the commitment we made at the 2008 summit that Ukraine will become a member of NATO. But they've offered no timeline for membership. What do you make of that?
Well, this has been the same problem for Ukraine since, for many years. I mean, it's corruption. Until Ukraine can actually sort out its corruption problem, it's not going to be invited into NATO. And during a war, this is probably the worst time ever to go and try to, you assure the NATO members that there is no corruption. But the other thing, which is even more important, is the fact that if they were invited into NATO now, that puts NATO in direct combat with Russia. And that changes the political Rubicon completely. And nobody wants to do that, particularly when Putin is actually wounded as a result of the Wagner mutiny.
The G7 countries are expected to announce a wide-ranging security pact on the sidelines of this summit that will include defense equipment, training, intelligence sharing. But without a firm pathway for Ukraine to join NATO, how effective will any of that be to deter Russia?
Absolutely essential, because the support from the West up until now has ensured that Ukraine still survives today as a country. Without that support, there would be no Ukraine. So what Ukraine needs now is a lot more ammunition, a lot more equipment to push forward their offense against the Russians. And without that, we'll pretty much see the end state is what we see on the map today, but they need an awful lot more equipment in order to change that map.
When you were on our show last month, you talked about Ukraine's big counteroffensive. So far, it's been moving at a pretty slow pace. What is your reaction to how it's played out so far?
Well, it's actually played out about as expected. I mean, we got to kind of separate the war into two parts. That part before Christmas, where there were no mines, and the part since Christmas, where now it's just a plethora of mines. This is some of the hardest combat operations that any country can ever undertake. And to attack into a main defensive position like the Russians have built, it's going to be slow, it's going to be methodical, and unfortunately, it's going to be a killing machine for probably the rest of this year.
Retired Major General David Fraser, we always appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you liked this, be sure to subscribe here, or you can check out more Your Morning videos right here.